Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a really ancient debate, but one that honestly still feels incredibly relevant. It's all about mastering yourself. Imagine ancient Vasali, this quiet forest grove, Mahavavana Kugarasala. Seems peaceful, right? But a pretty significant conversation is about to happen. We've got two main figures here. First, a teacher everyone calls Bhagavan. It's a title showing deep respect. And opposing him, well, maybe not opposing, but challenging him, is Saccaka the Jain. He's known as a sharp debater, really likes to pick apart other spiritual views.
Right. And our job today is to unpack this conversation, which really gets to the core of self-development, not just physical discipline, but, the inner work too. We're looking directly at excerpts from the 6th Mahāsaccakasuttaṃ, an ancient text, so it's like getting a direct account. You'll hear these two sort of contrasting ideas about self-mastery, and it all leads up to this really powerful personal story.
Okay, so Saccaka starts things off, and he's pretty bold about it. He claims some ascetics, they focus only on what he calls body development, kaya bhavana.
Right. Enduring intense physical pain.
Exactly. But his criticism is that this makes their minds totally dependent on the body.
Yeah, and he points to some pretty extreme outcomes like collapsing, heart failure, vomiting blood, even madness, he claims. And then he flips it. He says others focus only on mind development, Siddha Bhavana. And they experience mental suffering that also affects the body, leading to, well, the very same symptoms. So for him, their bodies depend on an undeveloped mind. It's quite a symmetrical argument he's making.
And then he turns to the Bhagavan and it basically says, your followers must be like that second group, right? All mind, neglecting the body.
He really puts them on the spot.
So what did Saccaka think body development looked like? You said it was extreme.
Oh, it was. He gives examples like Nandavacha, Kisasakika, Makali Gosalas. These were known figures. He describes them as, naked, licking food off their hands, refusing invitations, following these incredibly strict food rules.
Like eating only once a day, or even less.
Yeah, sometimes once every 7 days, or even just once a fortnight. Really pushing the body through deprivation.
But here's a key detail Saccaka throws in, isn't it? He admits these same people sometimes eat huge, rich meals afterwards.
Exactly. To regain strength.
Yeah.
So they're building the body back up after breaking it down. It's this cycle.
Right. Deprivation and then indulgence almost.
Yeah.
But then the conversation shifts. Saccaka gets asked about mind development and what happens.
Well, this is crucial. He can't explain it. Despite laying out his case so clearly about the body stuff, when asked to define mind development, he's just silent. He doesn't have a definition.
Interesting. So that kind of opens the door, doesn't it?
Completely. It sets the stage for the Bhagavan to offer a totally different perspective.
So the Bhagavan points out, look, you don't even really get what body development is, let alone mind development. Then he gives his own definition. What does he say an undeveloped person is like?
Well, according to him, it's about reactivity. When an undeveloped person feels something pleasant, they get attached, they cling. But when that pleasant feeling goes away and an unpleasant one comes up, they fall apart. Sorrow, lamenting, beating their chest, just distraught.
So both good and bad feelings just overwhelm them.
Exactly. Because, he says, both their body and their mind are undeveloped. It's not about the feeling itself, it's about being overwhelmed by it.
Wow, that's a very different angle from Saccaka's focus on physical extremes versus mental extremes. So how does he define the developed person? This must have sounded pretty radical.
Oh, absolutely. It's a game changer. He says the developed person, the noble disciple, when they experience pleasant feelings, they don't get attached.
No clinging.
Right. And when unpleasant feelings arise, they don't sorrow or lament or get distraught.
They just experience them?
They experience them, but they aren't overwhelmed. Neither pleasant nor unpleasant feelings dominate their mind. Why? Because both body and mind are developed. It's integrated.
Ah, I see. So it's not about eliminating feelings, but changing your relationship to them.
Precisely. It's about the response.
Mm-hmm.
And Saccaka, hearing this, is apparently quite struck by it.
Yeah, the text says he immediately praises the Bhagavan, basically saying, you must be like that. You must have achieved this state.
And the Bhagavan acknowledges the compliment, but then he adds something even more astonishing.
What's that?
He says that ever since he left the worldly life, no feeling, pleasant or unpleasant, has ever managed to overwhelm his mind. Not once.
Ever. That's quite a claim. Saccaka must have been skeptical.
He was. The text says he expresses doubt. I mean, how is that even possible for a human being?
And this is where the Bhagavan shares his own story, right? To kind of back it up.
Exactly. It leads into this incredibly personal account of his own path to enlightenment. He talks about leaving home, young man, prime of his life.
Against his parents' wishes, even. They were crying, apparently. That must have been hard.
Incredibly hard. But he felt he had to. So his first move was to find teachers, the best ones he could.
Right, he went to Kalama first.
Yes. And he learned Kalama's system very quickly, mastering this state called the sphere of nothingness. It's a very deep meditative attainment.
Deep stuff.
So deep that Kalama actually said, "You're my equal now. Let's lead this community together."
Wow, that's quite an offer. But he turned it down.
He did. He realized that even this profound state wasn't the ultimate goal. It didn't lead to what he was truly seeking: disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, enlightenment, nirvana.
So it was profound, but incomplete.
Correct. So he thanked Kalama and left, continuing his search alone.
And then he found Uddaka Ramaputta.
That's right. And again, he quickly mastered his teaching, which was arguably even more advanced, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception.
Another incredibly subtle state of mind.
Extremely subtle. And again, Ramaputta recognized him as an equal, invited him to co-lead. Same offer.
But same realization for the Bhagavan.
Same realization. This still wasn't it. This wasn't the final liberation from suffering. True understanding had to go deeper still.
So he left again, still searching.
Still searching. He ended up in this peaceful spot near Uruvela, seeking solitude.
And this is where he has a major insight, isn't it? The simile is about fire.
Yes. This is a real turning point. 3 similes, he said, that he'd never heard before, all about making fire with wood.
Okay, walk us through them. What was the first one?
First simile. Imagine trying to light a fire using a piece of wood that's not only wet and sappy, but it's actually submerged in water.
Impossible, right? You just get tired.
Exactly. And the meaning. Ascetics who are still mentally immersed in sensual desires, whose desire hasn't really been given up internally, they can't achieve enlightenment. Even if they torture themselves physically, the inner state is wrong, like wet wood underwater.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the second one?
Second simile. Now imagine the wet, sappy wood is out of the water, maybe on dry land, but it's still wet and sappy.
Still impossible to light a fire, I guess.
Still impossible. And the meaning here. Ascetics who might be physically separate from sensual pleasures living in the forest, perhaps, but internally they still crave them, their desire isn't abandoned. They also can't attain enlightenment. Physical distance isn't enough. The wood's still wet.
Right, the inner condition is still the problem. So the third simile must be the key.
It is. Third simile. Now you take wood that is dry, maybe even decaying a bit, and it's on dry land, far from water.
Ah, now you can make fire.
Precisely. That is possible. The meaning. Ascetics who are truly separate from sensual pleasures both physically and mentally, whose inner desire and craving are completely abandoned. They can attain knowledge and vision.
And interestingly, he adds, whether they undergo extreme suffering or not, right?
Yes, that's the crucial part. The suffering itself isn't the deciding factor. It's the internal state, the dry wood on dry land, the mind free from clinging that makes enlightenment possible.
So this insight, it really shifted everything for him. It wasn't about the pain, it was about the desire.
Completely. Internal abandonment was the key.
Okay, so armed with this understanding, then he decides to practice extreme austerities. That seems counterintuitive. Why?
It does seem strange, doesn't it? But maybe he thought, okay, now that I understand the inner condition is key, let me see if combining that inner state with extreme physical effort yields results. Or maybe he was testing the limits, proving to himself and others that even the most extreme path wasn't the way.
So he really went for it. Describe some of what he did.
Oh, the descriptions are intense. He talks about clenching his teeth, pressing his tongue against the roof of his mouth so hard he'd break out in sweat, just trying to restrain his mind with his mind.
Wow.
He practiced breath retention, stopping breathing through his nose and mouth. He said it caused violent winds in his head, immense pressure, like a loud blacksmith's bellows in his ears.
That sounds incredibly painful
Yeah.
and dangerous.
Extremely. Then he'd block his breath through his ears, too. He described sensations like his head being split open with a spike or his belly being carved out with a butcher's knife.
Goodness.
He said his whole body felt like he was on fire, like being roasted over coals. But, and he emphasizes this even through all that, his mind wasn't overwhelmed by the pain. His mindfulness remained.
That's incredible. And the food restrictions.
Severe. He cut down to eating just minuscule amounts, like a tiny bit of bean soup or lentil soup a day.
And the physical result?
Extreme emaciation. His limbs became like withered vines, his buttocks like a camel's hoof print. You could see his spine like a string of beads. His ribs stuck out like rafters of an old shed.
Oh my.
His eyes sank deep into their sockets. His scalp shriveled up. He says he could touch his backbone by pressing on his stomach.
Unbelievable.
He describes collapsing when trying to relieve himself. His hair, which was characteristic, started falling out when he rubbed his limbs. People saw him and thought he was dead, or maybe a ghost.
And they commented on his complexion too, didn't they? Saying he'd lost his radiance.
Yes, that his clear, bright complexion was gone, replaced by a dark, almost black or mottled appearance because of the malnourishment and strain.
So after all of that, enduring more suffering than perhaps anyone ever, what was the conclusion? Did it work?
No. That was the absolute definitive conclusion. He realized that no ascetic past, present, or future could possibly endure more than he had.
Yep.
And yet all that horrific suffering did not lead him to any higher knowledge, any special insight, any enlightenment. It was a dead end. This extreme physical path was not the way.
That must have been a profound, maybe even disillusioning moment to realize all that effort was misplaced.
Profound, yes. Disillusioning perhaps about that specific method, but it led him to the real path. He remembered something crucial.
The rose apple tree.
Exactly. A memory from his childhood. Sitting under a rose apple tree, spontaneously entering this state of deep meditation, what would later be called the first jhana.
A state free from desires, free from unwholesome thought, just filled with what joy and pleasure born of seclusion.
Precisely. And in that moment of remembering, he thought, that must be the path to awakening. Not torture, but this state of balanced, joyful concentration.
So he decided to change course completely. He started eating again.
Yeah, he decided to take normal food, rice and gruel, to regain strength.
And the 5 monks who were with him, hoping he'd find enlightenment through austerity.
They left him. They thought he'd given up, returned to luxury, abandoned the striving. They just didn't understand his insight yet.
Wow. So he was alone again, but now on what he felt was the right track.
Exactly. He regained his physical strength, and then methodically he started cultivating those meditative states, the jhanas.
Can you briefly remind us what those are like, the 4 jhanas?
Sure. So the first jhana, detached from sensual pleasures, detached from unwholesome states, but still with thinking and pondering, filled with the pleasure and joy born of that detachment.
Okay.
The second jhana, thinking and pondering fade away. There's inner tranquility, unification of mind, concentration, and the pleasure and joy born of that concentration. Deeper stillness.
Right.
The third jhana, the intense joy fades, replaced by a more subtle pleasure and equanimity. He remains mindful, clearly aware, very balanced.
And the fourth?
The fourth jhana, even that subtle pleasure fades. There's only pure equanimity and mindfulness beyond pleasure and pain, a state of utter stillness, where even the breath might seem to cease.
And throughout entering and abiding in each of these states.
He explicitly says, again, no feeling, pleasant or unpleasant, overwhelmed his mind. That core principle held true.
So his mind is now incredibly concentrated, purified, stable, unshakable.
Right. And it was in this state, prepared by the jhanas, that he attained the 3 crucial knowledges all in one night.
The breakthrough night. What was the first knowledge?
First watch of the night. Recollection of past lives. He remembered countless former existences, in detail where he was, what his name was, what he experienced, how he died, where he was reborn, spanning back 3 eons.
Wow. And second?
Middle watch of the night, the divine eye. He could see beings dying and being reborn throughout the universe, understanding how their actions, their karma, led to their future states, happy or unhappy destinations.
Seeing the bigger picture of cause and effect.
Precisely. And then the final, most important one.
The third knowledge in the last watch of the night.
Yes. The eradication of the asavas, the taints, the corruptions, the deep-seated defilements that keep beings trapped in the cycle of rebirth.
What are those taints specifically?
Primarily the taint of sensual desire, the taint of existence, the craving to be, to continue, and the taint of ignorance, not understanding the true nature of reality, of suffering.
And eradicating them meant?
It meant he fully understood suffering, its cause, craving rooted in ignorance, its cessation, the end of craving, and the path leading to that cessation, the Noble Eightfold Path. His mind was completely liberated. He knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming back to any state of being.
That was it. Awakening. Enlightenment.
That was it. And again, he stresses, even in the midst of these profound insights and the bliss of liberation, his mind was not overwhelmed.
Incredible. Now, Saccaka is still there, watching all this unfold, listening to this whole account. What's his reaction at the very end?
Well, he observes the Bhagavan. And he notes that even after this long, intense discussion, dealing with challenges and deep doctrines, the Bhagavan's complexion is clear. His face is bright. He seems completely serene. Saccaka actually asks about it.
How does he stay so calm?
The Bhagavan explains that he teaches often to large assemblies, but he always maintains his concentration. He doesn't get flustered.
And he mentions resting too, doesn't he? Something about napping.
Yes, he confirms that sometimes in the heat of the summer afternoon, he mindfully takes a rest, lies down. He acknowledges, some might call this delusional for a renunciate.
So how does he define deluded versus undiluted?
He gives a very clear definition tied to his awakening. A person is deluded if their esavas, those deep defilements that cause rebirth and suffering, are not abandoned.
Okay.
A person is undiluted if those defilements are completely abandoned, rooted out entirely, like a palm tree stump that can't grow back.
And his own defilements.
He states unequivocally that his own defilements are destroyed, rooted out. He is undiluted.
How does Saccaka take this final assertion?
He's amazed. He contrasts it with how other teachers he's debated, like Puranta Kassapa or Makali Gosala, would react, getting angry, evasive, changing the subject when challenged.
But the Bhagavan just got clearer, brighter.
Exactly. Saccaka's deeply impressed by this unwavering clarity and calm. And with that, acknowledging the profundity of what he's heard, he takes his leave.
Wow, what a journey. From Saccaka's initial challenge to this incredible personal testimony and redefinition of development. So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for us, for you listening?
Well, we've clearly seen two very different paths presented, haven't we? Saccaka's initial view focused on extremes, either harsh bodily control or mental focus, seeing them as separate and often detrimental.
Right, leading to collapse or burnout, but not necessarily wisdom.
Whereas the Bhagavan presents an integrated path. True development isn't about punishing the body or even just focusing on the mind in isolation. It's about cultivating a state where both are developed.
So that you're not overwhelmed by anything, not pleasure, not pain, not difficult thoughts.
Exactly. True mastery isn't about getting rid of feelings or experiences, but about developing the inner stability, the clarity, the equanimity to meet whatever arises without being knocked off balance.
Yeah.
Not getting attached to the good stuff, not despairing over the bad stuff.
It feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? We're constantly hit with stimuli internally and externally. Our feelings, our thoughts, they can easily overwhelm us.
Definitely. We get swept away by pleasant things, wanting more, or crushed by unpleasant ones, wanting them to stop. This dialogue really forces us to think about that reactivity.
So maybe the question this leaves us with is, what does it truly mean for you to master your inner world?
To cultivate that kind of resilience where life's ups and downs, the pleasant and unpleasant, don't fundamentally shake you. What small steps, what practices might help move towards that kind of inner unshakable stability, something to ponder?